Hello, the following is a live recording of the first public meeting for the W&OD Trail Lighting Project that was hosted by the town of Leesburg on May 2nd, 2024. My name is Dustin Kuzan. I'm a senior engineer for the town of Leesburg and the project manager for this project. If you have not done so already, I would encourage you to subscribe for updates to the project on the project webpage at www.leesburgva.gov/WOD Trail Lights. That's /WOD TRAILLIGHTS. On that page, you can find frequently asked questions along with answers and other information as far as updates. However, if you have other questions or comments on the project, please feel free to send me an email. My email is dkuzan@leesburgva.gov. Thank you and enjoy the presentation.
So first I'll talk about the team. I'll introduce myself and everyone on the team here. And then we'll get into the life of a capital project. We just want people to understand how the project moves through from beginning to end. And then we'll talk about the project overview and history, and then get into some of the goals, design criteria, and the constraints, and then talk about partners and stakeholders that are involved outside of just our team, and anticipate a schedule followed by Q&A. So we are with the Office of Capital Projects for the town of Leesburg. My name is Dustin Kuzan. I'm the project manager. To my right here is Doug Wagner. He's the assistant director. And over there, Christine Rowe is a senior engineer. Our consultant that will be designing the project is Rinker Design Associates. And if you want more information on us, there's a website right here you can just click on that, and you can also find our emails. And then for now, I'm going to pass this to Doug, let him talk about the capital projects.
So on the previous page, there was a link to the capital projects website. This is one of our capital projects. You can go there and see the status of any capital project, anything that we're doing in the town of Leesburg. Wanted to give you all a quick sort of how a capital project goes from an idea into a project, into the ground, and then gets used by the citizens. Somebody has an idea. The idea could be a legal or a regulatory requirement. It could be a council request. It could be a safety issue, a maintenance issue, an accessibility issue. It could be a request from the public. It could be a request from you all. It could be a request from town staff. These are all compiled and put in a list in the capital projects department. And as funding becomes available, every year, CI capital projects has funding to do studies. As funding comes available, we take those and do an initial study, very, very conceptual study that takes the idea, looks at the feasibility of the issue of the idea, looks at potential costs and constraints. So we have a feel for where it fits in the grand scheme of everything. And then grand scheme of everything being roads, highways, buildings, everything to do, stormwater, everything to do with what the town of Leesburg deals with. As community needs change and funding becomes available, these ideas go to council, and council prioritizes them and either puts them directly into the 6-year CIP, or if they're not quite ready, it goes into futures or priority futures, which is sort of a backup to the 6-year CIP. Once it gets into the 6-year CIP, as funding becomes available, our funding sources are the town of Leesburg. We've got funding from VDOT. We've got funding from the federal government. We've got funding from the state for several of our projects. As that funding becomes available, we start out with doing a site survey and very, very conceptual engineering. So it's taking from here and going to sort of the next engineering level, not a desktop. We're getting actual survey and doing a more detailed analysis. And then at the end of that, we will have public input, kind of show everybody who's involved, like we're doing right here, everybody who's involved in it, what the project is and what the concept is. And then as more funding becomes available, we go into final design documents. Final design documents are their plans that a contractor will bid and will go to construction on. Final design process goes from very initial stages all the way through 100% design. Typically somewhere around 60 to 90% design. We'll have another public meeting to go over where we're at, how everything's going, address any concerns at that time. Anytime that you see, and I realize that y'all can't really see this because the text is so small. This is on our webpage if you have any interest in it. Anytime you see a public input area, it's to talk to you guys and get input and review the design. After final design, we go to property acquisition rights. If we need any right of way, if we need easements, we go to the property owners and negotiate any rights that we need to construct. It goes to utility relocation, if we're relocating any water lines, any sanitary sewers, any electric lines. Bidding, and then at bidding with the successful bidder prior to starting construction, we'll have a pre-construction meeting with the public to introduce our construction team, introduce your capital projects, staff members. Then we go to construction, and then we go to project closeout. Depending on funding, this can be a 10-year process. It can be a 15-year process. It can be a 2-year process. It depends on the funding and depends on the project. The reason for all of this is I wanted to explain where we're at on this project right now. It is an idea that came up, and council wanted it to go into our CIP. It was enough support for it that council wanted it to go into our CIP. So it's in our CIP. There is some funding available. Now we are doing the initial study. We did not do initial studies on it. Now we're doing the initial study. We're doing our surveys, and we're just starting the process. So we're gathering information from you all, and then we're going to start. So I imagine a lot of your questions are probably going to be details that we don't know yet, but we'll take your input and use those through our process. Right now, you may have seen surveyors along the trail. We're gathering survey information and having this meeting to get information together. And then in the next couple of months, we'll start with the very, very conceptual engineering. So sort of an overall of so everybody understands. We're not all the way through the process. We're just starting the process.
For those of you who are not familiar yet, I wanted to give a project overview. This is a map. This is an aerial map here. You can see Catoctin Circle running along this way. The highlighted areas is the project limits. It connects Catoctin Circle on both sides. So Catoctin Circle Southwest by Loudoun County High School here, all the way over to Catoctin Circle Southeast where the flagship car wash is. So the project endeavors to provide connection by lighting the trail to provide a safe route of travel from the residential areas in Leesburg to the downtown area during non-daylight hours. And that would be in the mornings before the sun rises or the evenings. We'll get a little bit into it, like a little more into that later. The overall length of the project is 1.25 miles. And I already described the limits. So the history is we have a town plan called the Legacy Leesburg Town Plan, and there's a section of the plan that supports walking and biking. And the idea is that we can get people to walk around the community, bike around the community to relieve congestion so people aren't driving downtown. As Doug mentioned, the council asked Public Works to look into lighting on this. And the idea, it came from some of the other jurisdictions that are along the W&OD trail further to the east. Here's some of them here, Herndon Falls Church and Reston. And most of them, the lights shut off at 9 o'clock. I think only one of them, Reston, that shuts off at 10 o'clock. And over here, you can see well, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a funding breakdown. This is taken from the CIP. We have funding coming from the town, Loudoun County, and federal grants. And the project originally was added in June 2020, and it's been kind of pushed back to give time to discuss it further. And then we're also doing a part where we're ending. I'm sorry, if you can hold a question if you have. Did you have a question?
Yeah, it's.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So the total design funding is about 400,000 and the total construction about 2.17 million. But that is a very preliminary planning estimate. After we get to conceptual design, which will be approximately about 30%, then we'll have a better sense of what it could cost. And then at that time, we're going to come back to the public and the council before we move forward. Some of the goals, wanted to talk about the goals a little. So, because at this time we don't have anything nailed down yet, but these are the goals are the things we're striving for. So, as I mentioned, there's a town plan called the Legacy Leesburg Town Plan, and there's 3 strategies in there that this project helps to support. I'll just let you read those for time's sake, but and as I mentioned, by the end of this year or by the fall of this year, we're hoping to have the target is to have a conceptual design, and then that will be reviewed by the public and the council. Thanks. The other goal here is to light it beyond daylight hours. And just to give you an example of the trail usage, in 2018, there were counts done along the trail for another project, and we found that there's 700 people using the trail during the weekday and 1,800 on Saturday. And they didn't do Sunday counts, but we apparently in Loudoun County, the Nova Parks has the trail open from sunrise to sunset. If you go east of Loudoun County all the way to Arlington, then the operating hours are 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that's regardless of whether there's lighting or not. So that's something that we'll have to discuss as part of this project is changing those operation hours. And again, as I mentioned, Reston is a little different. They're open till 10 because they keep their lights on until 10. So the last goal here is very important, that we're going to strive to minimize impacts to the surrounding areas and the environment. So for the environment, we're talking about nocturnal animals such as bats, insects, impacts the trees, impacts the wetlands. And then what's most important for many people is going to be how the light impacts their houses, which is known as light trespass, and also preserving the night sky, which is known as light pollution. So we have some strategies I'll get into how we're going to reduce those impacts. Just to talk about some of the users that may benefit from this project, this is taken from Loudoun County Public Schools. This is a map of the walk area for Loudoun County High School. Everything inside this red area, they are not provided bus service, so they can either get driven to school, maybe they have a car themselves, but they can walk, and I think that's probably the preferred option for many of the students. So each star here is just the intersection with these streets to give you some idea of what you're looking at, and the limits are highlighted in yellow. So we're not going any further here. So during winter months, these when school opens, there will be students walking in the dark, and then in the winter hours after school, especially if there's after school programs, some of the kids may find themselves walking in the dark, and it's less crossings and less conflicts with vehicles along there. So it may be a preferred route for some of the students to take. Likewise to that, the North Star School also has a walk zone that overlaps the project limits here. Another thing I want to point out was this is a map of the downtown area here. This in the pink is the historic downtown designation, and then in the red is it's zone B1, which is downtown business district, and that's kind of the core business area that the town would like to drive economic development. So you can see how the trail connects to that. So the design criteria is is based on industry recommendations, best practices, things like that. And we adopt them because we want to strive to hit those marks. Those are the marks that we strive for. We're not always going to hit them, and that depends on constraints, which I'll show you in the next slide. But some of the design criteria that will be included is for lighting design. And lighting design, it's not just a put in a light and call it a day. There's a lot of variables to it. And one of them is the mounting height. Another is a pole spacing. There's going to be, we're going to have to work around underground utilities. And then of course there's different light fixtures and different brightnesses, different colors, there are temperatures that could impact the light design itself, which would impact the light trespass on the people's properties, or how wide the light is distributed, or whether it's distributed, one way or a circular, and then security is going to be another thing that we're going to be concerned about. If the police department if we're going to have lights, are they going to want to see people's faces on the lights, or do we want a lower lighting where you can only see people from so far? So all of those things will be taken into account. I haven't figured that out yet, but one thing we are definitely striving to do is follow dark sky recommendations, and I'll show you a little later what some of those fixtures may look like. But essentially what dark sky is, it's standards and guidelines and they approve certain light fixtures that meet these guidelines that we can use for the project. Another thing is the trail operations and safety in terms of, people riding their bicycle, and if somebody goes off the trail, you don't want them striking a pole. So we're asked to leave a clear space of at least 5 feet. In addition, Nova Parks at some point wants to widen the trail and potentially, and therefore we need to leave that space open. And then finally, there's going to be aesthetics involved in the design, and there's people at the Board of Architectural Review, which governs the look of the historic downtown area, and they're going to be involved with approving some of the aesthetics for the lights, at least in a small section of the trail that's historic. And sorry, it was landscaping was one more thing as part of our design as well. So impacts the trees, but also can we use landscaping to help block lighting from nearby residents? So all that stuff will be considered in our design. Now, we have these ideal things that we want to meet, but we're not always going to get there because of constraints. So these constraints frequently drive how our project ends up. One of the big ones is going to be underground utilities, because this is an old railroad. Long time ago, utilities started using it, and they have rights to that land, and there's tons of stuff that might be under there. There is also obviously private property we need to work around. We're connecting to Dominion Energy, to their power, so they're going to have requirements that we're going to have to follow. Nova Parks owns the trail, operates the trail. They have their own regulations on things. As I mentioned, the Board of Architectural Review will be involved. And then there's trees that we're going to try to avoid impacts to sometimes. Streams and wetlands we're going to have to work around. And then, of course, the monetary constraint of the budget. And just so you know that the streams and wetlands and all they'll do a study on those impacts, and we'll have to follow the process for this project. I'm getting a little more into the meat of it, but this is just an idea of giving you an idea of what dark sky lighting is about. In the old lights that were down along King Street, I don't know if people remember them, like big globes like this. So that's kind of how the light would be distributed all around. And as you add shades on top of it, you can direct the light downward and keep it from going out and up. So then if you're keeping it from going up, then you can preserve the night sky. And of course, if you direct it down, you can keep it from going too far out, affecting other properties. This is our just a little section of our lighting ordinance. And it does tell us that we need to reduce impacts of glare, light trespass, and overlighting. And there's a little more detail to that, but essentially we're required to reduce our impacts when using lighting. This are what some of them the fixtures could look like. These three here, dark sky approved. This one is on a pedestal, might be, I don't know, 12 to 16 feet high. These ones are probably taller. They have cantilevers. These would probably more likely be used if we're connecting to a utility pole and want to connect a cantilever to the utility pole. And where these would be installed, individually. One thing to keep in mind with installing new lights here is that we have the power lines running across the top. We can't be installing things in the pathway where they need to maintain the power lines. So that's another constraint. And over there, so an example of bollard lights in Tyson's Corner, which we'll look at. So there's hundreds of these options, and we'll be looking at several of them and trying to evaluate which might be best based on input from you guys and what our study shows. And we'll do a lighting analysis, which will tell us how bright the lights will be in different locations based on our design. Some of the other partners involved, we have the town council, we have you guys, the residents and the public, the police department, Nova Parks and Dominion Energy. And these are people that will provide input on the project that could influence the way we design it. And then there are approvals needed too. And if we don't get approval from these people here, if we might not even be able to move forward. So these are, town council needs to approve it, Board of Architectural Review in the downtown area, Nova Parks, Dominion Energy, and then there's various other permitting agencies that would be involved. So it's not, the point of this is just saying, it's not just us making these decisions, there's a lot of people involved. Slide. The anticipated schedule for this, today is our first public meeting. Also, if you received a survey notification earlier this year, that today was the last day that survey crew could access your property. If they did not notify you, they did not access your property. But as of today, if we're going to go back out and survey anything on your property, we have to send you another letter, another notification. So if you have concerns about that, that ends today. In May, so this month, we're going to send out a resident survey. We're still working on approving it, but what we want is feedback from everybody, and it's going to allow you to, tell us whatever you want. And you can tell us, if you want, you could tell us where your property is and you're concerned about certain types of impacts to your property, if it's light trespass or a light being too close and things like that. And those are things we'll keep in mind with the project. We're also going to gauge support with that survey, see who supports it, who doesn't support it, which will help with later on when we bring this to council for a vote. In August, we're going to be, or somewhere around that time, we'll be finalizing conceptual design. And then after we finalize it, then we'll be preparing again to come back to the public in late summer, early fall with a second meeting. And at that time, we'll have more layouts and have a better sense of what we're impacting and how we're impacting different residents. And then sometime in the fall, we'll bring it back to town council for an endorsement. And if we receive an endorsement by the council, then we will begin final design sometime in 2025. That's also contingent. I think we have funding.
We've got portions
of funding. So yeah. So I think we might need a little additional. Plus, once we get that estimate, we'll have a better sense of how much money we actually need. So that will happen next year if everything goes well this year.